It's Slate Night, the Film Fan Podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Corey and Mason.
Hello, and thanks for sitting down with us. This is our 10th official episode of Slate Night, the Film Fan Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Mason Schmidt, here with my best bud, Corey Knudsen.
Hey-o.
As we get ready to talk about all things movies, except kind of a little bit different this week, as we are freshly into 2025 when this episode will be airing. So we thought it'd be a great time now to kind of circle back and talk about what a year we had with 2024. Some of the ups, the downs, the surprises, some of the worst shit we saw, and also highlighting just creme de la creme, top shelf, best stuff we were able to luckily see in theaters this past year. But before we get into that, Corey, how have you been? And secondly, what are we celebratorily drinking today for this week's episode?
In honor of this very special episode, where at this time, when this episode airs, you'll be on your honeymoon.
I will be on my honeymoon.
Congratulations
I will be,
on that.
as opposed to drunk in your apartment speaking into a mic, I will be drunk on a beach staring at my wife's ass.
Okay, well, sure. And watching the Vikings game.
And hopefully watching the Vikings beat the Lions in Week 18, because I really wish I would have had the forethought to plan my honeymoon a little bit differently, knowing kind of the importance of this football game now, which I can't tell my wife. But anyways.
Yeah, hopefully she doesn't listen.
She doesn't.
Cool. Sweet. Anyways, what we're drinking to celebrate this is something that I bought a while back, which is a whiskey that I've wanted to try for a long time, and we both tried very recently. It's Lagavulin. It is a single malt Scotch whiskey that has been aged for 11 years. I found out about it from the show Parks and Rec because Nick Offerman's character Ron Swanson drinks it, and then they released a Nick Offerman themed edition of this whiskey, and I bought that. I don't remember how much it was, but it was very expensive for a bottle of whiskey. So fucking cheers. It's the smokiest whiskey I've ever had in my life.
Oh yeah. It's drinking liquid smoke and then chewing on wood and tar, like, at the same time.
I feel like I am up to my shoulders in Smokey the Bear's asshole, and it is crazy, but I kind of like it now that I'm into it. Every time I have it, I'm like, I need to get into it a bit.
I'm usually not like an ice cube or water in my whiskey. I'm pretty good at just keeping it straight. But for this one, it's ice cube, let it fully fucking melt, take a sip, struggle with that first sip, cough up the smoke, and then just
Power through.
Hopefully liquor myself up to where this isn't as much of a problem. This is somewhat of a hard sipping whiskey. And I just, frankly, I'm not man enough to just drink this straight. So, but anyway, moving into kind of this format for this week's episode, Corey, take it away.
Yeah, so we obviously will cover our top 10, but before we do that, we want to do a few other categories. So first off, we're going to cover the worst movies of the year, because that's always fun to talk about and just shit on those fucking pieces of shit. And then we'll hop into some most disappointing of the year, most surprising of the year. We'll do some honorable mentions, then we'll get into our top 10. So I'm going to jump into my worst of the year just to get right into it. Despicable Me 4. This movie is just ass, and I hate that I spent time to watch this movie because I know how good the first two movies are and how good they can be. This movie sucks. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2.
Boo!
Yeah, fuck you. I know you kind of like this movie for some reason. The first movie is shit, and this movie is a little bit better than shit, which still is shit. It's not good. It's not fun. I don't enjoy this movie.
It's a pretty solid review,
I think it's ass. Then Kraven the Hunter. Yeah, you've heard us talk about this movie. It's ass. I don't know how this movie got made. There's lines of dialogue. Ariana DeBose says at one point, yeah, my grandma died and I didn't see her much after that.
She died.
That's a crazy line. Yeah, of course you didn't see her much. She died, stupid bitch. Sorry, that was mean. I love Ariana DeBose. She's great in West Side Story. Watch that movie if you haven't seen it. She's an Oscar winner, and I don't know what she was given in this movie. It's crazy. Madam Web, another Sony Spider-Verse movie. Hey, fucking end your universe. This shit sucks. It's ass. I hate this movie a lot, but it is so much fun to watch if you're greased up a little bit on some liquor drinks. God, it's a great time. So watch it with friends drunk, and it will be very enjoyable. But my least favorite movie of the year, Borderlands. Holy fuck. What the fuck was this movie? I've never played the game, so I don't have a background reference for that. Just solely judging it on the movie. This was so bad. I don't know what went into this movie. I'm not a huge Eli Roth fan, and he directed this. I don't know. I don't even think he really had that much of an impact. I think the studio just wanted this to come out. So this was just a fucking dog shit movie, and we saw this together. We snuck some Twisted Teas in there, I think, and saw this movie. So that is my worst of the year. I really did not enjoy any of those 5 movies.
Moving into my worst of the year, which, surprise, surprise, there's going to be a fair amount of overlap, actually, on these. Godzilla X Kong: A New Empire. Maybe one of the worst titles I've seen for a major release. What a dog shit movie to me. I did not care about this movie. Dan Stevens is kind of chewing scenery a little bit, and I appreciate that every time I can get it. Brian Tyree Henry's here. Why is this movie here? Why... Godzilla X Kong. It's just a nothing movie. It feels like AI just rendered a bunch of bullshit of animals and monsters fighting. If this is your cup of tea, it might work more for you than it did for me. I was a little liquored up and I still didn't care much for it. So not going to be a movie I remember from this year. Madam Web, a movie Corey brought up, which I will attest could be a good time if you're drunk. Not a fun movie. Though, watching sober, as I did for the first time with my wife when we saw it in theaters, as I just struggled to not claw my eyes out with every little shitty piece of dialogue that Dakota Johnson uttered towards a very attractive Sydney Sweeney, with the horrible ADR of the villain, and just the most thrown together production I've ever seen, just in terms of trying to put out a Marvel adjacent movie, just to put out a Marvel adjacent movie that has no recognizable or important, influential, cool, interesting characters that mean anything to me. This movie could burn in hell, but fuck, I might get blasted and watch it again sometime this year. Kraven the Hunter can lick the darkest part of my butthole. This movie is what I said about Madam Web, except it's not enjoyable at all. It is so just head-scratchingly bad. It's not a fun movie. Aaron Taylor Johnson, you're better than this, and I know you're better than this, because Bullet Train was awesome. You were great in Godzilla. Like, what are you doing here, bud? Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. Maybe the movie that pissed me off the most in theaters, actually. To me, it's not hard to make a good Ghostbusters movie, which I will attest. It's probably very difficult to make any movie at least decent. But what the fuck was this attempt? Because it was bullshit. There's so many subplots that there's no main plot. The horror doesn't happen. The villain dies in a whimper. We have all these legacy characters back, and they all look like they're fucking just huffing paint to stay alive because they're dead as shit, boring as fuck. Why is Dan Aykroyd here? Why is fucking Bill Murray showing up with sunglasses and just really needing to wear sunglasses for this movie? I don't get it. I didn't have high expectations for this movie. I thought it would be easy for a Ghostbusters movie to be fine. Hell, I like the 2016 Ghostbusters movie. Fucking sue me. This movie? This movie is ass cancer that you get diagnosed with the same day your fucking grandpa dies of a stroke. Dog shit movie. But to build up to maybe the worst hunk of shit I've seen in the last, I'm going to say 5 years. I think that is a safe assessment. A movie Corey already glowingly reviewed, Borderlands. I watched this a little high, a little drunk, and goddamn it was I bored as shit. I hated this movie so much. And I like some of Eli Roth's work. I like Thanksgiving a great deal. But whoa, what a listless attempt at making a major blockbuster. And why is this movie getting pushed into theaters when there's dog shit slop similar to this being put out on streaming every fucking day? This is trailer trash, first grade nonsense, and it should not be on screens. I severely worry for the other people, the other like maybe 3 people that were in the theater with us, as I feel like they walked in normally, but they watched this movie and left limping. I don't get it. Dog shit movie. Horrible movie. But anyway, before we harp on too much negativity of some of the bad of the year, let's talk about, hopefully, aside from some disappointing movies, Corey, what are some other surprising and great movies, honorable mentions, I'd say, from this past year?
Well, I do have to say that I'm not going to let you get by without saying you loved Claptrap in this movie, voiced by Jack Black.
No.
There's
There's one bit. There's one
where he's
bit.
shitting coins or something.
That part got me a tiny bit. I did laugh kind of aggressively at that, where he's just like, it's just the way his like eyeball camera blue screen thing looks up and he's like, don't look at me, as he's just shitting screws profusely. That kind of shook me, but I also have the sense of humor of a 12-year-old, so like it's fine.
Yeah.
But wow, what a mess of a movie Borderlands was. I'm so happy to see a movie like that bomb so aggressively hard this past year.
Yes, of course. Okay, so I'm gonna jump in now and do just a couple categories quick. Gonna do first my most disappointing. Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire's in there. I did not like this movie. Like you said, it's not that hard to make an enjoyable Ghostbusters movie. Coming off of Afterlife, which is a movie I love and is my second favorite Ghostbusters movie, I just wanted a fun like New York adventure with the original cast. You get the new cast. And there's so many subplots and side characters that I don't give a fuck about. There's a ghost girl that's doing shit in this movie that is friends with McKenna Grace. And then they have a lab of some shit where they're doing things. And then Kumail Nanjiani's a fucking god after he goes in like his grandma's closet and does shit.
He's a fucking airbender, firebender
Whatever.
type shit.
Who gives a fuck? This movie was bad. I don't need any more Ghostbusters movies. Another disappointing one was very early in the year that I kind of forgot I saw until I looked at my rankings of the year, and it's Argylle, which in and of itself is a very interesting movie because it's based on a book that's the fourth book in like in a series that this is based on, and it's weird as shit. I don't know. Matthew Vaughn, I don't quite know what you're doing here. But Matthew Vaughn can make great movies. I mean, for the most part, has made great movies with The Kingsman 1 and 2, and then Layer Cake I really like as well. But Argylle, I just wanted to be a fun spy action movie. It has a great cast, so like that's not an issue. But this movie was so discombobulated and very strange and had awkward sequences and wasn't enjoyable. I did not really enjoy this movie. But on the flip side, most surprising movies of the year. These are ones that I saw the trailers for or heard about and didn't have much anticipation, but then went into them and really liked. The first being Wicked, which you're going to hear about later in this episode from both of us. Trailers I thought looked okay. I've never seen the Broadway musical, but I was very surprised by this movie. Another one is Transformers 1. The trailers I thought looked very like, oh, this is going to be a very child-friendly movie and not like, I don't know if it's going to hit the Transformers vibe I want. Watched it in theaters and I'm like, holy fuck, this movie is so much fun. I really, really like this movie, and I think it's probably the second best Transformers movie, I would say. Second or first, honestly, I can make the argument for, but definitely check it out if you haven't seen it. My last, most surprising is going to be a little combo piece, which is The First Omen and Immaculate, which came out around the same time early in the year, I think like March or April maybe. And they both involve nuns and the Catholic Church and a horror element to both movies. And I really enjoyed both of them. I think Sydney Sweeney was great in Immaculate, and I think the ending to that movie is really cool. And then The First Omen, I watched through all the Omen movies leading up to it, which the first one's great. The other ones, it was like 6 hours of just ass cancer going into my mouth, which I don't know how that works.
Oh.
A lot of ass cancer mentions on this episode so far.
Ass, yeah.
Yeah. But The First Omen, I think, actually was really solid. And both movies deal with similar subject matter, but I think both surprised me of just how much I enjoyed them, even though I saw them within like a week span of each other. So that's my most disappointing, most surprising of 2024.
Yeah, my most disappointing to kick off with a movie that I actually ended up overall enjoying, but not loving, because I had pretty high expectations, but I wanted to mention Longlegs. That movie, that film, had just such a fantastic marketing plan and rollout. The posters, the trailers, they were genuinely terrifying. I remember like growing up and when I would watch Adult Swim as a kid, watching Family Guy at like 10 p.m. and like a horror movie like Fright Night or something would come up on TV and it would play late at night and I would get really freaked out in my own bedroom. watching these trailers for Longlegs, it gave me that same feeling of me being a kid watching a movie where I'm like, fuck, I don't know what this is going to be. I don't know how, like, I don't know if I can handle this. And then I watched the movie, and it felt kind of formulaic. There are some aspects towards the end that are a little bit more creative, but overall, I was kind of let down a little bit by how scary I was hoping this film to be. Nicolas Cage has a electric performance, not necessarily the most, like, bone-chilling, scary performance, but Mommy, Daddy. Yeah, it's almost more laughable at times than it is scary and chilling. Overall, I was really hoping for this to kind of be like the back to basics, almost Silence of the Lambs-esque murder mystery story, and it's good. It's good enough. It's fine. It didn't shake me as hard as I was hoping it would. In terms of the 62 films I saw this year, it is number 27, and I was really hoping it would make it in my top 10. Not the biggest disappointment, but one that I was just really hoping would be a little bit better. Ghostbusters, Frozen, Empire, dog shit movie. Really didn't like any single aspect of this movie. Maybe the most bored I've been in theaters in 2024. Me and Corey, you brought it up. I mentioned it too. You've made Ghostbusters Afterlife. Ghostbusters, the original, is such a fun, energetic, almost family film that has comedy that is biting, and just like aggressive and good jokes. This film has nothing, has no character, has no personality. It has a ghost girl, and McKenna Grace falling in love with her for kind of potentially maybe, and Paul Rudd, but also Finn Wolfhard is dealing with Slimer in the attic, and that's important. And this movie didn't know what it wanted to be. It didn't know what it wanted to focus on. It clearly didn't think it had a story that was worthwhile. So, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. I really wish the Ghostbusters franchise, looking back at how long this has been running, it would have just stopped with the original. Smile 2. Boo. Yep. Wow. Fuck this movie. Saw 62 movies this year. It's ranked 57th. If that doesn't say much. I love the first Smile. Very big fan of that first film. I had pretty medium expectations for this, just hoping it would be at least good. I could not stand this film. I thought it was pretentious, over the top. I thought it was lazily directed. And I thought the characters were grating, annoying, and I did not care about Naomi Scott one bit. Moving into my biggest surprises, Corey already touched on this, but Wicked. Maybe one of the best musicals I've seen in the past 10 years. So much fun in the theaters, amazing music. Like Corey, I have not seen the Broadway musical, but I was immediately swept up in the world of Oz, and I do think that this is the best Oz has ever looked on screen. I love this film. Had such a good time. The music still plays in my apartment because my wife is obsessed with it. Cynthia Erivo gives a great performance. Ariana Grande is amazing. I'm sure you'll hear us kind of gloat and freaking gush about it a little bit later on. But Wicked was a movie that wasn't fully on my radar until I was in theaters and just fucking lapping up every fucking second of it. Another big surprise, Late Night with the Devil, which is a movie I was a little late to. Kind of just came out of nowhere. I didn't have any expectations just because I feel like I didn't have time to develop expectations. And then I just heard that this was potentially the greatest horror film to come out in 2024. And then I sat down and watched it, and I just dug the vibe. I loved David Dastmalchian as the lead. This film really just sold the aesthetic it was going for, and it was so true to like behind the scenes late night television making, and I just love the horror aesthetic to it, the 70s style. Everything worked for me in this film. Like I said, I didn't have much time to get any sort of anticipation or expectations in line before I saw this film, and then when I saw it, it blew me out of the water. I was immediately surprised by it. Go check it out if you haven't. I'm sure many of you haven't seen it. Another big surprise, Wild Robot, which is a movie I didn't even watch a trailer for until I saw it. I heard good things about the trailer. I knew Lupita Nyong'o was in it. It was from DreamWorks. Whatever, sure. I'm excited to potentially see this animated movie about a robot. And then it became my favorite animated movie of 2024, even more so than Inside Out 2, even more so than Transformers 1, which I'm happy, Corey, that you brought up because that is a film I didn't have high expectations for, and that is, I would likely say, my favorite Transformers movie now. But anyway, Wild Robot, what an emotional ride. everything I look for in an animated family movie, this movie excels at. I love this movie. It really tugged on my heartstrings. The animation is stunning. And I really love the story. It's a pretty simple story, but I think everyone can relate to it. And then one more big surprise for me was The Substance, a movie that I heard about, didn't know a lot about, didn't know if I really cared to go see it. And then I saw the trailer, and I was like, oh, maybe I should go see this. And I saw it, and I was like, wow, David Cronenberg is blushing right now with this movie. This is some of my favorite body horror I've seen in recent memory. Maybe it's up there with Possessor Uncut by actually Brandon Cronenberg. But The Substance was such a fun burst of disgusting energy I've seen in a film in 2024. I love this movie. I recommend it as much as I can, but also I will recognize that this maybe won't be a movie for everybody. But The Substance was a roller coaster of a ride with amazing performances by Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley. I loved, I was going to say Randy Quaid. Is it Jack Quaid?
Dennis Quaid.
Dennis Quaid. Wow.
We'll get there
different
eventually.
generic white guy name.
He chews a lot of food in this movie, and you
in a
hear it.
very disgusting manner. But everyone is just, they're not performing. They're just their characters. It's an insane movie. I love the bombastic stuff it does, especially towards the third act. It came out of nowhere, and it may be one of my favorite horror movies of 2024.
Right on. I also wanted to shout out The Wild Robot. I think, surprisingly for me, one of the better screenplays of the year. That movie has some lines that I think about a lot, and from a lot of different characters. So I really love that movie. Now we're going to jump into our honorable mentions, and one that you had in your most disappointing was actually my number 15 of the year, which was Longlegs. I really dug this movie. It gave me what I wanted from a Silence of the Lambs vibe investigation movie. I love Micah Monroe. I think she is a very underrated actress. She's in The Guest, and then a movie called Watcher, right? Not The Watchers, because The Watchers was the.
I believe it is Watcher. I believe just Watcher.
Yeah,
which came out a couple years ago. Actually, I think it was almost around COVID when it released.
Yeah, but very, very good movie. Good
Underrated.
Thriller. So
good mention of that one.
Yeah, The Watchers is the M. Night Shyamalan's daughter directed that movie earlier this year, which again is it's an okay movie. It's fine. But anyways, Micah Monroe, very good actress, and I loved seeing her in this movie. Nicolas Cage is giving it his all. I love the atmosphere. I love the tone that Osgood Perkins sets for this movie. And I have actually only seen it once in theaters, but I'm really excited to watch it again. Because like you had mentioned about earlier, the marketing for this movie was crazy. They did the one trailer where it was like the heartbeat, tracking Micah Monroe's heartbeat the first time that she saw Nicolas Cage's character, which is just brilliant marketing. Like, that's so cool and a great way to do a trailer. So I really enjoyed the movie, and one that I'm excited to rewatch. Another one that you and I saw the same day that we saw Venom: The Last Dance.
Crazy way to frame that.
But it's Conclave, which is an awards contender this year. Ralph Fiennes gives one of his best performances in his career. It follows the process of picking a new pope, and I think that the political intrigue and the kind of chaotic energy behind the scenes that nobody really sees is very interesting in this movie. I think the ending, I'm still a little bit iffy on of if we needed a twist reveal, but I think the movie is a great dialogue-driven movie that Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, so many great performances here, and seeing different perspectives of how these characters would tackle being the Pope. So I really like that movie. I think it's great. My favorite animated movie of the year is actually Inside Out 2, which is at my number 13 of the year. This one for me just hit a little bit more emotionally than The Wild Robot, just in terms of animated movies. I think this is a movie I was skeptical about because I didn't think we needed it, but when I saw it, I felt like, wow, this actually does fit so well with the first movie and feels very earned and feels very necessary. and especially dealing with the new anxiety or the new emotion of anxiety voiced by Maya Hawke, who I think is great voicing that character. And it hits on so many things that, like, it's not just a teenage girl, Riley, in the movie. Like, it still impacts, like, me, and I'm sure you as well, and a lot of other people just having anxiety about different situations in life. And the way that it is shown in the movie, I think, is really impactful, and I really, really do enjoy it. At my number 12 is My Old Ass, which we talked about at length, and is such an emotional movie, very unique movie, great performances. Maisie Stella, I think, gives such a good performance, and I'm so excited to see her. And so many lines in this movie and sequences that made me tear up about growing up and appreciating where you're at in your life versus where you want to be or what you're looking forward to. So, very cool movie. I think it's on Amazon Prime right now, so definitely go watch that one. And then my last honorable mention, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. They keep having these long titles, but I'll keep watching them if they're this good. Another one I was skeptical about because I love the Rise, Dawn, and War, that trilogy of new Apes movies, and I didn't know if I needed another one. But this movie jumps forward a generation or two, and we get a new story, we get some new characters, and I think it's really interesting. And I'm very curious to see how they continue this story because I think they set up some very interesting things. The visual effects in these movies continue to just blow me away of how these apes look and the individual hairs on their bodies and like how crazy it looks that a computer can do this still blows my mind.
The fact that you have an ape with all of the hair it has falling into a river and interacting with water for an extended period of time. And there's a couple of scenes that are just mind-boggling to me, too.
Yeah. So I was very, very happy with this movie, and I'm down if they do, like, another 2 movies, kind of do a trilogy of movies in this timeline. So those are my honorable mentions. Just missed out on my top 10 of the year.
Corey, that is a solid 5 set of honorable mentions. And while I will acknowledge I don't necessarily love Longlegs as much as you do, everything that you said about Longlegs and the rest of these other 11 through 15 films for you, I agree with 100%, especially in Inside Out 2. There are some really good emotional moments in that film. I don't really have that on any of my lists here, but just in the first film, there's joy going up to sadness saying, hey, Riley needs you. And then in Inside Out 2, you have sadness going up to joy and being like, she wants you. She wants to be happy. And just thinking about that now is just like, fuck, oh my God, I'm going to cry. Yeah, amazing honorable mentions. It's insane kind of that we have... Looking back, this was a good year to have an honorable mentions list that could be a whole nother top 10 for someone else.
For sure.
Like we had a really good, diverse set of really spectacular films. Moving on into my honorable mentions, I already kind of briefly touched on this movie being a big surprise for me, but The Wild Robot, again, my favorite animated film of the year, a very emotional roller coaster of a film for me. I watched this movie, I think, at 2 a.m. on my laptop in the other room because my wife was sleeping, and I was just like, you know what, I'm going to just go watch this movie on my laptop. I really want to see it, and it made me ugly cry. And this movie will forever make me think of my mom, who is the best person in my life aside from my wife, maybe. I'm not going to pick favorites, actually, out of those two.
Yeah, just we'll leave it at that.
I'll leave it at that. Yeah, this film will always make me think of my mom and the relationship I have with her. A movie that I absolutely adore. Finally, a Tom Hardy movie that comes out that's actually really good. The Bike Riders, which is a movie I feel like that kind of got slept on a little bit. Great cast, Jodie Comer, Austin Butler. Austin Butler giving a great performance where he's not having to do an impression or a very deep voice like Fade Rautha or Elvis Presley. Granted, I do love him as Fade Rautha, but it's nice to just see him as like kind of a normal dude. And it's about a biker gang, but they're not like a gang. It's just guys that love what they do and love the community of it. And it's a great slice of life movie of this gang, of these guys that have a shared interest, and they love to be able to partake in things with each other. They love riding. They love the camaraderie of it. They look at each other as brothers, and I thought that there was just a really good dynamic between all the characters in this film. Jodie Comer's very heavy Midwest accent is something that you kind of need to chip away at until you're really accustomed to it. But I love this movie. Tom Hardy gives a great performance. Sometimes it gets a bit predictable, but I did love this movie. This would be my number 14 of the year. Moving into my number 13 of the year, my other honorable mention would be My Old Ass, which Corey did also touch on. One of my favorite coming-of-age films with some, again, incredibly emotional moments of just growing up and moving on, and stuff that applies not only to a person necessarily going off to college, but a person at the age in their life where they have kids that are leaving the nest and they have to kind of turn their back on certain aspects of their lives. It's a very emotional film. It's funny at times, and it has a lot of good relatable aspects that I think anyone can really sit down and get something from. If you haven't watched it, which again, a lot of these films, I feel like there's some that are really sleeper hits that people missed out on. You should go do your homework, catch up, watch My Old Ass. Wild sentence, watch My Old Ass. Anyway, moving on into my number 12, another movie that Corey touched on, we saw together after Venom: The Last Dance. Woo! Surprisingly, this was the better of the two. Conclave was an amazing movie, a movie that is full of men talking about religion and about appointing a new pope. How interesting can that be to the majority of the public? What a riveting script this is, and what a masterfully directed film by Edward Berger. I love this film. The score is amazing. Ray Fiennes, I think this may be one of your best performances I've ever seen, maybe up there with Schindler's List. I hope you get some recognition, maybe a little gold statue at the end of Oscar season. I really love Conclave. Again, kind of with what Corey said, there's a late reveal that I kind of deem unnecessary. I don't know if I needed it. I may be a little bit more progressive than a lot of the old white Catholics that were in the theater watching it with us, but I'm like, really? Do we need this? But nonetheless, loved this movie, really enjoyed the time, and yeah, it was better than Venom: The Last Dance, thankfully. Yeah. Moving into my number 11 pick, I did not think I needed another Alien movie. And then you announce Fede Alvarez is going to take over and make a Alien almost sequel somewhere else in the world, otherworldly film that is kind of away from the Ellen Ripley story, away from the Prometheus story, just this ragtag group of people trying to get off this planet. And they have a plan to get off, but they need to go up to this ship. And on this ship, they discover the most proficient, excellent killing machine, which is the xenomorph. And wow, does this movie handle facehuggers and the xenomorphs in maybe potentially the best fashion? Aside from the original Alien, I'd say. I think Fede Alvarez gets this world as a better director, more suitable. He's more suitable than Ridley Scott for this world, at least right now. I would die on that hill. Ridley Scott has made mention that he wants to come back to the Alien franchise. Please don't. Stay away. Fede Alvarez, he's comfortably got it. It's fine. It's a great movie. I love the performances. There's some kind of callbacks and throwbacks and kind of nostalgia baiting sequences that I didn't necessarily need, but thankfully they're kind of few and far between. I don't know if I needed Rook in this movie, but he is here in all of his Ian Holmes reincarnated fashion, which is, you know what, leaves something to be desired. It's CGI that didn't work. Otherwise, the rest of the movie is beautiful. The horror is great. The suspense is great. There are some gnarly effects in this fucking movie, and I loved it. And I'm not surprised that it came from the director of Don't Breathe. So thank you, Fede Alvarez, for this magnificent movie. I have it on 4K, and I will be watching it until my eyes turn red.
Hell yeah. Again, your honorable mentions, obviously a lot of great movies there. Alien Romulus is like right on the edge of my honorable mentions list, so I'm glad that you mentioned it. Just to mention like a couple quick sequences. There's one in like Zero Gravity towards the end of the movie, which is such a brilliant way to bring fresh life into the Alien franchise, where they're going through like the acidic alien blood as they're going through it. And then one where they, like, the temperature of the face huggers, and they have to go through a room.
Yeah.
Like, it's just
it's
very
so
new,
good.
inventive ideas for the Alien movies. And I think, like, this movie takes place in between Alien and Aliens, so I think this is such a great trilogy to watch. And Fede Alvarez did such an incredible job with that. And then I just wanted to shout out, the day that we saw Bike Riders together was one of my favorite days from this past year of 2024. We went and saw this movie at one of our favorite theaters, the Imagine Egan. And then we went to a Half Price Books and we bought some used movies. And then we went to a Five Guys and had burgers and fries and fucking shakes or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Like, I don't know, just one of the days from this past year that sticks out to me, that of just doing everything that I loved in one day, of watching movies, buying movies, hanging out with my best buddy, eating some greasy burgers and fucking amazing food. So, yeah, a really fun memory of watching that. But now that we're a fucking half hour into this, we'll actually jump into our top 10. But it's fun to mention those other movies, though.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good stuff.
If you're familiar with kind of how our Christmas episode went, how our top 10 most anticipated for 2025 went, what we'll have, kind of the structure moving forward is we'll have Corey list a 10, and then we'll talk about it, go to my 10, and then we'll kind of ping pong back and forth.
You got it.
There we go, finally. From our 9, 8, 7, all the way down to 1, talking about our favorite films from the, I feel like an underrated year, or will be looked at as an underrated year of 2024 for a great year for films.
Yeah, it's a good year, and we do have some overlap on our lists. I think a little over half. Maybe,
That,
but
and you have a film, not to bury the lead or tease the list too much, you have a film that I saw 62 movies this year, and one of the films on your list is in the 50s.
yeah, I'm excited to talk about that one.
Yeah.
Before we get to that, I want to mention a movie at my number 10 that flopped at the box office. It makes me so sad that it did, because it's really great, and it's Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. I watched through the original 3 Mad Max movies before seeing this. I'd never seen them before. Watched through them, and I really enjoyed all 3 of them. Even Beyond Thunderdome, there's the back half of that movie is kind of meh, but still very fun. Fury Road is a great movie. I think Furiosa is such a great prequel to Fury Road, and I love Anya Taylor-Joy in the lead role. Chris Hemsworth as Dementis is so memorable. One of the best performances of the year for me personally. I really loved him in the movie. His voice is goofy, it's fun, but I really enjoy it. I think it fits the world really well. And the thing that I loved about this movie is that we got to explore the world that was established in Fury Road and see these different factions and different groups, and kind of go to their like home base almost and see how they operate. And in between those, you get some incredible action sequences. Like, you get another scene on like the Fury Road, if you'll want to call it, like with a tanker with the cars behind it. But it's so visually stunning. And even though there are some sequences that are a little bit more CGI heavy than Fury Road was, it's still so enjoyable. And the character of Praetorian Jack in this movie,
Awesome.
I didn't anticipate this character at all, but was really, really cool. And I really, really like this movie. I think George Miller, again, I know we've talked a little bit this year about Ridley Scott, Clint Eastwood, these older directors directed movies with so much energy. Like George Miller coming into this movie and having done all 5 of these movies, but still having that energy to direct these sequences, just with how old he is so impressive. And I'm very sad that this movie didn't do well at the box office, because I think it is so, so good. And I think it's my second favorite Mad Max movie. I will say, behind Fury Road,
Fury Road, yeah.
It's that and Road Warrior. Mm-hmm. This one, they're kind of tied for second almost, but very, very good.
That is a beautiful number 10 pick. The Mad Max franchise is maybe my second favorite film franchise, ahead of Star Wars, behind James Bond. I loved Furiosa. It was such a fun ride. Everything you said tenfold. I loved that movie. It just did not make my honorable mentions or my top 10, but wow, what a great time in theaters. And I am so happy to have that Furiosa steelbook existing right next to my steelbook of Mad Max Fury Road. What a good kind of 2-part saga for this anthology type franchise of this just wanderer that just tries to help. I love this franchise. My number 10 is a movie that kind of snuck up on me a little bit. I heard great things and I went and saw it as soon as I possibly could find a theater showing it, but that is A Real Pain, directed by Jesse Eisenberg, a film that rocked me. Emotionally, it was just everything I've looked for in a film about kind of relatives reconnecting. And there's a lot of relationships within this film that made me think of relationships I have with my brothers and other relatives. It's kind of a great not ragtag, but just two characters that are foils for each other. You have one that's really eccentric and abrasive and exaggerated and very outgoing and extroverted, while one's more reserved and introverted, and he's more calm and he thinks before he talks, whereas the other one is going to talk and let you know what he's thinking. This movie worked for me on nearly every single aspect. I think it's such a well-written film, well-directed, and it's very emotional. Like I mentioned, there are some scenes when they go to the Holocaust concentration camps, and they kind of walk through and almost take the viewer on a tour, and you feel the weight of everything. And I love the premise of these two characters reconnecting while also trying to look back into their family's history. They're going on this trip through Europe to kind of reconnect themselves with their grandmother, who has just recently passed. And I love films that are really focused within families, how they work together, where they come from. And I think Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin in this film are a match made in heaven. They work so well together. I love the ending. I know you and I talked about this movie a lot. The ending really works for me. I really, really appreciate this movie, the subtleties. There's some really good comedic moments. Kieran Culkin had me laughing at times, but also I was like, fuck, dude, that's really sad, actually. So I think that this film handles kind of the duality of like the happiness and sadness that comes with relationships that have kind of been extinguished by time. I fucking loved this movie, and I hope that there's a solid release of this on Blu-ray that I can kind of nab and keep in my collection, because movies like this that make me think back to myself and to my family, they're special to me, and I need to own them. But A Real Pain, watch it, please.
For sure. Again, this is another one that was like just outside my honorable mentions. Kieran Culkin obviously is great in this movie, and he's getting a lot of the... I think he is the frontrunner for Best Supporting Actor at the Oscars.
I hope so. That would be amazing.
But I think Jesse Eisenberg is equally as good. I think he is so good in this movie, and I don't know that he'll be nominated for Best Actor, but I think he deserves it. I love that movie as well. My number 9 is the one that you mentioned that you did not like from this year. Another one that we disagreed on, and we'll talk about in a few of my picks, but Kinds of Kindness, the new Yorgos Lanthimos movie. I went into this movie not knowing anything about what it was. I hadn't seen a trailer, I don't think. I loved discovering what this movie was. And, like, I almost hesitate to, like, explain it. So if you don't want to know anything about this movie, like, maybe tune out for the next couple minutes, because I don't want to ruin it if you haven't seen it. But this movie is essentially an anthology that's 3 separate stories that very loosely connect. But it has the same cast of characters. You have Emma Stone, you have Jesse Plemons, Willem Dafoe, Margaret Qualley, who, again, having a huge year, and I love seeing her break out. And this movie was so interesting to me. And although I think the first 2 stories work better than the third one, I really enjoyed watching just the weirdness of this movie and the uniqueness. There's so many strange moments that I'm like, I don't know if I like this, but I like that I'm seeing this in a movie. And every year there's a movie that is so unique and different that I just need to appreciate and love, and that's this movie for me this year. This movie has some like horrifying elements to it. It has some of the funniest things that I've ever seen. One scene with a dog in a garage that is the funniest thing I've maybe seen all year. And I was one of like maybe I don't know, like 10 people in a theater that just busted out laughing, and nobody else did, but I thought it was so funny. It's a movie that I think is, like I said, so unique, and Yorgos Lanthimos is a very weird director. He's not a mainstream director by any means, and I think that this is a movie that I will actually want to go back and rewatch a lot just to see kind of that connective tissue between the three stories. But I think it does hit on a lot of really good themes in all three stories and good character arcs throughout them. And that's a difficult thing to do when a lot of movies can't do that in telling one story in a runtime. But this movie has three separate stories and gives good arcs and has so much interesting, unique elements to it. And I really like this movie. I cannot wait to watch it again. And I think it is a movie that I will recommend to nobody. I know I recommended it to you, obviously, and was like, you need to see this movie because I need your thoughts on it. But to anybody else, I don't think I could recommend it just because it is so weird. But it comes in at my number 9.
Yeah, so correction on your part, I did like this movie.
Okay.
There's my list, honestly, and we talked about this before prior to recording, from like 25 to number 55 on my list are movies I liked. And then after 55, once you get into 56 to 62, those movies are ass. But Kinds of Kindness was number 51 for me. Very wildly, weirdly humorous, and I love Yorgos Lanthimos for his ability to just make anything dark very funny. And I know exactly what scene you're referencing. And you told me that going into it, that you thought there's a scene that made you die. And I thought I saw it in the first story. And then I sat there and I was like, oh no, it's definitely this. I know exactly what you're talking about. I see the dog. That's fucking wild that this isn't a movie. I appreciate this movie a lot. An issue I kind of have with anthology films is that sometimes there's a little bit of an inconsistency between the stories, and that they kind of sometimes can wreck the pacing of a film, can make it feel really long, especially like what you said. I really actually preferred the first two stories. The third story really lingered for me. So, good enough movie. I'm happy to see that we're talking about it today. Again, anything that Yorgos Lanthimos does is worth being mentioned because he is an all-star in terms of directing. Moving on into my number 9, which is a film I still don't think you've seen, which I can't wait for you to see. Strange Darling. Wow. A movie I didn't watch a trailer to, I didn't know anything about. And this is maybe one of my favorite film-going experiences I've had all year, because it was a movie that I heard about briefly, and I was like, you know what? I really want to go see a movie. I don't really know what all is out. Oh, I've heard The Strange Darling is like somewhat interesting. I knew nothing of the premise. I think I had seen a snapshot of the trailer, and I just went into it as blind as hell, and I fucking love this movie. This is the most inventive cat and mouse thriller I've seen in a long time. It's so much fun. Like I said, it was one of my favorite theater-going experiences this year, because the audience that was with me, I don't think that they knew what ride they were on, and then we all just got to ride it together, and it was just like, what the fuck is going on? It's wild. It has amazing, brutal moments, very funny moments, and the acting is sublime. The movie's so good. I think it is such an underrated thriller from this past year. I know my wife is really eager to sit down and watch this with me, because this is a movie I will not shut the fuck up about. It's such a good thriller with twists and turns. Don't look into anything. If I could advise you to do anything, it would be to go into this movie as blind as you possibly can. It is such a fun ride. You'll have a great time. It's a brief, well-paced thriller with many twists and turns. Some, I will say, can be a little bit predictable, but I had a blast the entire time. There is not a single wasted frame in this film, and it was so much fun to watch. Corey, I can't wait for you to eventually watch this, because I think this could potentially make it at least into your honorable mentions. But I fucking love Strange Darling. That is my number 9 film of 2024.
Yeah, it's always tough. There's always like those few movies that either maybe haven't come out yet. I know like September 5th, The Brutalists are kind of coming out early next year, which I'm very excited to see, but I may have to borrow the Blu-ray that I bought you for Christmas just to watch this movie because I'm very excited to see it. At my number 8, I mentioned it earlier in my most surprising, and that is Wicked. Wicked Part 1, which the second part is called Wicked for Good, not Wicked Part 2. I don't know if we mentioned that in any other
I don't
shows.
think we've talked about that. I'm not thrilled by that either.
Just call it Wicked Part 2.
Yeah, it's fine to just be a part 2.
Anyways, I mean, we talked about this on the pod a few weeks back, but this movie really did surprise me. Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, who, you know, we talked about, we know from Victorious, and then just her music career. And seeing her deliver a really, really great performance was so exciting in this movie for me personally. And I loved The World of Oz. I think you talked about that earlier. And I think I mentioned the production design of just like the train at the end of the movie. It's these small things that, like, when you build these sets and you build these props, it really just sucks me into the movie and makes me appreciate it so much more. And the music is so great. Obviously, it's from the Broadway musical, but I think they do a great job of adapting that. My only like little flaw that I mentioned before is that I think the movie is a little bit too long, just because this movie is the same length as the entire Broadway musical. So I'm curious to see part 2, but the fact that this movie made me so excited for part 2 and the ending of this movie is so powerful. I think the kind of flight scene with Cynthia Erivo is so good, and the vocal chemistry between Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo is so powerful. And I really love this movie and did not expect to love this movie as much as I did, but I am very happy that it is in my top 10 at my number 8.
I love Wicked. I'm going to keep what I have to say about it until later, because spoiler alert, you will be seeing it also on my list, because it was, one, a great surprise from this year, but also, like I said, one of the best musicals I've seen in a very long time. Wicked is a great pick. Moving on into my number 8 pick, I have Heretic, which is a A24 horror film, marketed as a horror film. I don't know if it's all that horrifying, but wow, what a well-written script. Hugh Grant in this movie, I hope you get recognition in some sorts, just aside from a Golden Globe. You are amazing. You are insanely talented. And I have only really established a love for you since Paddington 2 when you played the villain, and now you're in this, and you're just chewing up every bit of scenery as you throw the religion of these two Mormons that you invited to your house. You throw religion in their face, and you say you throw it in their face in such a commanding and realistic way that has many examples and metaphors to kind of everyday pop culture, but they're willing to combat you on these things, and they're able to raise you on some things and fight back against you. I said Strange Darling is a great cat and mouse. This film is an excellent cat and mouse film of just two sides trying to outsmart each other. Not necessarily trying to outconvince each other, but to outsmart each other. I, again, didn't find this movie to be horrifying. And the fact that I went into a horror movie hoping for a horror movie, was not really scared at all through it to begin with, but loved every single second of it. I think that this is one of the best written scripts of the year. It is darkly funny at times. It has some genuinely, like, off-putting and unsettling moments. Hugh Grant gives, I think, maybe my favorite performance I've ever seen of his. Sophie Thatcher is fantastic. I don't know. I went into this movie hoping for at least a good time with my wife at the theater. And I walked out with a movie that made my wife be like, I don't like movies about bad people doing bad things. I can't see these movies anymore. And I was like, honey, everything you're saying is why this movie means a lot to me. This movie is fucked up, and I appreciate it. It is, while it falls into the horror genre and it isn't the most horrifying, it may be one of my quote-unquote favorite horror films of the year. Corey, what did you think of Heretic?
Heretic's great.
Yep.
You get a sick Jar Jar Binks reference from Hugh Grant in the movie.
Wild pop culture references.
Sure. Why not? No, Hugh Grant is incredible. I really enjoy that movie too. Again, another one that's like just on the outside of my honorable mentions, but really, really did enjoy that. At my number 7, I have The Substance, which this movie came out of nowhere. I heard about it like a week before I saw it, and everybody, like film critics just online, I know we watch a lot of reviewers, were just like, this movie is so good, you gotta see it, you gotta see it. And sometimes when you see those movies, you're like, yeah, it's okay. This movie I saw, maybe the most unique movie I've seen in years, like 5 years, I would say, of just what a cool and incredibly unique concept that has great performances from Demi Moore, who I feel like we haven't seen give a great performance in a long time. Not to say she's not a great actress, but just she hasn't been in a lot of things lately, I feel like. And Margaret Qualley, I mentioned earlier in Kinds of Kindness, who is just like breaking onto the scene and gives a really good performance. Dennis Quaid eating fucking crabs or lobster or whatever is so good.
Just chewing, smacking his
He's
lips.
literally chewing scenery.
Literally, yeah.
But this movie really does touch on great themes of how you perceive yourself and how an industry, like an entertainment industry, perceives you. And Demi Moore, who, like, objectively is a very attractive woman still.
Stunning.
So you're watching the movie and you see her not be comfortable with herself and want to change herself and want to be a prettier, younger version of herself. And you see the ramifications of that. But as a viewer, the initial problem I had was like, it's Demi Moore and she's still really attractive. But that's not the point. It's that how they view themselves and how we view ourselves, I think, is so like a very, very topical theme in this movie, because we view ourselves so differently than how people view us. And so just seeing her, especially in a scene in the middle of the movie where she's about to go on a date and she has makeup on and she keeps rubbing it off and trying to put it back on and keeps rubbing it off and putting it back on. It's such a relatable scene and a relatable character moment, and I think this movie, it really just executes everything so well. And even just the process of how making a like younger version of yourself, like the
Activator.
the activator that they use, and the whole process of these tubes and these different like the body horror of it. I don't want to like say too much about it, but the body horror of it is so interesting, and I think that it really is so impactful while also being very visceral and very it's just, it really does hit you. It really, I don't want to say too much.
Nasty.
It is a little nasty. But it really is one of the most surprising movies. I didn't mention it in my surprising list of the year, but like just seeing it, I have thought about this movie so much, and maybe more than almost any movie I've seen this year. I just think about scenes from it, and I absolutely loved watching this movie. And I think it is another one that I wouldn't recommend to a lot of people, but is certainly a interesting movie to watch if you're into film even a little bit, just to check it out.
Fantastic pick. Similar to Wicked, a film I'm going to kind of save some thoughts on, just because, spoiler alert, you might see this pop up again later this video and later on in my top 10 list. Moving on to my number 7, another horror film, Late Night with the Devil. Wow. David Dastmalchian. Wow. What a fun surprise this film was. I watched this movie. I've seen this movie 3 times this year. I thoroughly enjoy it every time. It's a movie that once I saw it, I was like, I need to find people to show this to. I need other people to watch this movie, because it's a rather small-made film, independent film. When the movie starts, there's like 30 production companies that come up before the actual fucking movie starts.
It's like the Family Guy
yeah,
skit.
it's like the sketch where Peter's like, "Oh yeah, movie starting. Oh no. Oh yeah.
Oh, guys walking. Oh no. Oh, that's a preview. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
It's literally that. I was laughing at it in the movie theater when I saw it, just because I was like, how many fucking production companies went in to make this movie? Which just shows how much of a committee it takes to put together something like this. It's such a well thought out, well choreographed, well planned film. It has great great horror influences and the way it handles possession and all incorporating this into a late night talk show and this man desperately trying to basically save his dwindling career. And you know what? Hey, let's bring on this girl that says she was possessed, and there's this doctor that's been kind of working to rehabilitate this young woman. I love this film. It is twisted. It is not necessarily the most scariest thing I've seen this year, but it is such a fun, horror-infused, retro wild ride. I love this film. Their performances are great. They do such a great job of really living in the aesthetic of the time period and really making it feel like an authentic show. And you get the beautiful glimpses of behind the scenes. The film will shift to black and white to show, all right, cut. We're moving to this setup, and hey, studio audience, just chill while the host kind of gets reset up for the next after the commercial break, and you kind of see the behind the scenes of it, which as someone who used to want to work in film production, seeing that stuff is just like fucking candy to a fat kid. I loved it. But watching this movie was just, I was grinning from ear to ear, and it was another one of those unexpected surprises that I didn't hear much about it, and then it was out, and then I saw the trailer, and I was like, fuck, I need to go see this right now, and I've loved it ever since. It's a film that's been on my top 10 list since I saw it, and I've just been hoping that it would stay on as it came out relatively earlier on in this year, and I've just been, all right, well, I got this movie I need to go see. It might knock this movie out, and as is the case with some of the other movies in this list, it's just something that has been a standout for me earlier on in this year, and I'm happy to see that it's still had that much of an influence throughout the rest of 2024 for me. Corey, I know you love Late Night with the Devil. You're a big fan of it. What do you think of it? I love this movie.
I'm going to save my thoughts. It will be coming up later in my list. But I did want to shout out the physical media release of this movie. We both got
Beautiful
the
Steelbook.
And it comes, something I always appreciate. This Steelbook is, which I guess not everybody knows what a Steelbook is, but it's, you have like your Blu-rays and they're in a very like metal case of steel, which is really nice, and they have very nice artwork on there. But they also included like an air freshener and like postcards and just like a lot of cool extra stuff with this movie.
And a poster for the show, like the Night Owls.
Yeah, so it's very cool. So I just wanted to shout that out. I will give my deeper thoughts in a little bit here. But going into my number 6 of the year is maybe the most fun I've had in a theater this year, which was Deadpool and Wolverine. The only MCU movie we got this year, which really refreshing. It was really nice just to have one
break.
Wow, this movie delivered everything that I wanted. And it's very interesting to have this movie amongst a lot of like kind of deep like dramas or horror movies or sci-fi, a lot of interesting stuff. But that's the great thing about movies, is that there's things that can just impact you so much. And especially with both of us being big fans of the MCU and with Marvel properties before the MCU, seeing this movie was such a treat just as a comic book movie fan. I absolutely loved Hugh Jackman back in the role as Wolverine, which, again, hearing that initial announcement that he's coming back, you're skeptical. You're like, do we need to bring him back? Like, I don't know if we do. But I think he gives the best performance in this movie. There's a scene at a campfire with him and another character. I guess I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it, but just him at a campfire talking about his life, his previous experiences in this alternate universe, and how that has impacted where he's at in that point in the film. This movie has cameos that feel they feel earned. They feel like, yeah, this is fun. This is a great time. It brings such a smile to your face, and like got me so excited in the theater to have these characters that some we'd seen before in movies, some we had never seen before in this role, and see them pop up and be like, holy fuck, I didn't know that was a possibility for a cameo. Like, this is a thing that's happening right now. And I think the thing that is great about this movie is that it's not just the cameo fest of like, oh, it's other Marvel Easter eggs and cameos that you like to see. I think that Wolverine has a great arc in this movie. And I also think Deadpool has a great arc, even if it's not executed perfectly. I think his relationship with Vanessa throughout the 3 movies has been done pretty well. And I really love seeing a scene towards the end of the movie where Deadpool and Wolverine are like working together while a Madonna song's playing, which the Like a Prayer, the version of that song that they use in this movie is so sweet and I love it. But you get little moments in the third act that are like really impactful and you feel them and like brought a tear to my eye, honestly, just being such a big fan of these characters. And I really loved seeing it. It's, like I said, the most enjoyable movie I've seen this year. And I am so happy that it exists, and there's so much fun to be had with this movie. So that's why it is at my number 6.
If you haven't caught on if you've listened to any of our previous episodes, you know that Corey and I typically align on most things. So, again, surprise, surprise, spoiler alert, this may end up later on in my top 10 list. So I'm not going to say too much on Deadpool and Wolverine quite yet. And I'm going to just try and fluidly move into my number 6 for 2024, which is Sing Sing. This is a film that I know Corey has seen prior to me. Are you trying to get me to have more whiskey?
Do you want
right
more
now?
whiskey or no?
No, I'm good.
Cool.
I'm going to nurse this because this Lagavulin is really burning my uvula.
Word.
But anyway, Sing Sing, Corey saw it before me, and he mentioned just how good this film was. And I was like, shit, all right, well, I got to go see it. It was a movie I had on my radar, but I wasn't necessarily in the most urgent manner trying to rush out to go see it. And then I saw it, and I was like, wow, what just a great film of this theater troupe that works in a penitentiary. These men just trying to find a sense of community and to put something out that they can work on together in a productive, in a happy environment, in a healthy environment where they lift each other up and not necessarily are kind of boiled down to being horrible people for being in prison. They're looked at as being respectable counterparts to each other in these plays that they put on. And God, Coleman Domingo in this movie is just lights out insane. And I hope he gets a lick of awards recognition in terms of Oscars this upcoming season, just because he was I've always known he was a good actor, but seeing him in this role was truly a revelation for me. I love the direction of this film, a very emotional film. When it typically comes down to, I feel like when I put together my top 10 lists for a year of movies, it's usually movies that had a pretty decent emotional impact on me. And Sing Sing was, I would say, probably the first of 2024 that really rocked me. And I was really blown away by a lot of the depth of character between some of these, kind of what you would see on the face of them. Their basic, just kind of what they put out into the world. You'd expect from these characters, and the way that they connect with each other and push each other to grow and just let go of the hard exterior and just, hey, you're my scene partner. Hey, do you know your lines? I know you're in here for doing horrible, despicable shit, or you might have just say that you got caught doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. But I just need you to be a scene partner with me and put on this show. And it was just such a great movie for me in terms of kind of making me recognize the importance of kindness, the importance of patience with others. There are a lot of great scenes with Coleman Domingo, and I'm going to look to you, Corey, as I think you likely know the actor's name who played kind of the second lead, the supporting lead in this film with Coleman Domingo.
Yeah, Clarence Macklin.
Clarence Macklin. Another amazing standout performance in this film. Those two together on screen, they put together some of the best things I've seen in cinemas this past year. Wow. Their dynamic is so good, and the way it evolves throughout the film as Coleman Domingo just kind of relentlessly tries to kind of argue, not necessarily argue his innocence, but try and plead with the probation board to try and get a break in his sentence. And the way he is used as a mentor for other characters, I loved this film. It was a great picture, great A24 film, and like I said, one of the first films of 2024 that really fucking rocked me.
Yeah. I'm not going to say too much because this one's going to show up later in my list. So I'm going to jump into my number 5, which you already mentioned, Late Night with the Devil. Again, another movie that just kind of came out of nowhere. I feel like for both of us, we heard about it late and went to the theater and saw it. And this movie really hit on a lot of cylinders for me. I think that like old late night shows, they are so intriguing, but there is a little bit of like a weird like horror element to it, or like a weird creepiness to it. At least how they displayed in this movie. David Dastmalchian, I love seeing him getting a lead role, and I'm gonna just echo everything that you said. I mean, you really did hit it. There's a kind of the ending sequence of this movie. I don't want to spoil it, but there's like a moment in like static of like TV static on a screen that when I was in the theater, that made me nauseous. And that I've only gotten nauseous in 2 other movies in my life, and that was Hereditary and Midsommar. Late Night with the Devil was the third one. During that scene, and I think the environment of this movie, and like you talked about, how they really did capture the, not just the late night show, but the in-betweens of it, of the commercial breaks. You're seeing these characters. It works so well. I absolutely love it. I think it is one of the best horror movies, not only of this year, but of this decade. And I think it was so impactful, and it really was something that stuck with me, and I have thought about a lot since I've seen it too. So yeah, that is my number 5 for the year.
One thing I forgot to mention when I briefly talked about it in my top 10, that ending, the way the film wraps up with just, I'm actually not even going to say it because I don't think many people have seen it. Go see it. The ending is chilling, and one of the most just like creepy like final notes of a film I've been left with that I had to deal with. What a fantastic small horror film from this past year. Moving into my number 5, I have the amazing, basically a horror film, the dystopian Civil War, directed by Alex Garland and also written by Alex Garland, starring Kirsten Dunst. Kaylee Spaney, who we didn't mention, she was in Alien Romulus. She had a great year this year too. We had Margaret Qualley, Kaylee Spaney, Nicholas Hoult giving fucking amazing years this past year. Nick Offerman is also in Civil War, as well as Wagner Moura, and a bone-chilling, maybe the most horrifying performance by anyone, including Bill Skarsgård as Nosferatu, or Count Orlok, I should say. Jesse Plemons in Civil War gives one of the most unsettling, nauseating performances of a human I've ever seen in my life. But obviously this movie takes place in a dystopian war-ridden America where there's basically a new civil war. This film captures wartime photography in such a way that I feel like a lot of people didn't expect. I think a common gripe I heard from a lot of people going into this film was that they expected kind of it to take a side and be a little bit more biased or left-leaning or right-leaning, whatever people brought in with their own bag of bullshit or baggage. This film tries to cut down the middle, blatantly show to you the horrors that people are capable of. There's a shot within the opening scene of this film that I know I'm talking about, where they just light a man's head on fire, and I was blown away by how well filmed it was, how amazing the effects were, and how absolutely gut-wrenching the shot was. And that's just what this film is. It's about showing you horrible truths in a way that's not supposed to make you feel comfortable, in a way that's to show, like, hey, we're capable, regardless of if it's a small disagreement or a big disagreement or an outright war, we're all capable of horrible dog shit towards each other. And this movie really doesn't let people get away with trying to hide behind things. It's a very upsetting movie. It's a hard movie to be like, I love this movie, but because it's so upsetting and it's nauseating and disgusting, but it shines a light on things that I feel like people kind of miss, is that, and what I think the point of this film was to show how horrible we can be towards each other and the pointless nature of that. It's very upfront with its horrific imagery. And granted, there are some comedic moments. There are some lighter moments, but there are also some just tense as fuck moments, especially with Jesse Plemons, with Kirsten Dunst. Kirsten Dunst gives an amazing performance. I kind of knew what to expect coming into this movie. I've loved Alex Garland's work with Annihilation. I like Dread. I will say Men is an acquired taste for a film, but I do enjoy a lot of that movie before, I would say, the climactic third act, which, again, a very bone-chilling thing, but going into this, I kind of knew what to expect with Alex Garland. I think the way this film handles the importance of objective journalism is something that I feel like not a lot of people have mentioned or talked on or talked about the importance of. I think that this is one of the most important films in terms of telling the truth and showing the truth, no matter how disgusting that can be. It's a movie that, while was very well made, very well filmed, it was also just a hard pill to swallow for 95% of the runtime. And it has kind of a upsetting ending and an upsetting beginning and an upsetting middle portion, but it is a moving and emotional film nonetheless. Civil War is my number 5 pick for the year of 2024.
Yeah. Again, this is another one I will talk about in a little bit because I also really enjoyed it. So jumping into my number 4 is the most recent movie that I've seen, which is Nosferatu. Directed by Robert Eggers. It is his 4th movie. Deals with the vampire that is back in the 1920s, kind of lifted from Dracula, and there was a whole thing about trying to get the original movie out of print, but I'm glad that the original stayed in print so that we can get this movie. We talked about it on the previous episode of this podcast, but I really, really did enjoy this movie. I think that the atmosphere and the environment works so well in this movie, and building a sense of dread and establishing a cast of characters that are very diverse and build out this world so nicely. And I think all of the technical aspects of this movie are great. I really do hope that Jaron Blaschke gets nominated for Best Cinematography for this movie, because I think he deserves it. He got nominated for The Lighthouse, another Robert Eggers movie, so I have hope that he can get nominated for this one, because it really, truly is deserving of that. And yeah, it's a movie that I know you and I feel very differently on, but it really did work for me. I think that the kind of slow buildup of dread and of tension really impacted me, and I really felt that throughout the movie. And it's a movie that's not as much about the deep character depth, but about the atmosphere that it builds and of the time period that it's in, which we talked about in the last episode, but is something that Robert Eggers does incredibly well with The Witch, The Lighthouse, The Northman, of diving back into these time periods and making you feel like you're a part of that. So Nosferatu, a great movie that I really, really did enjoy and was very fun for me to see on Christmas morning. Even though it's not, I guess it sort of, there's some snow in the movie, maybe.
Wintry movie?
Yeah, it could take place during Christmas. I don't remember exactly. But either way, it was really fun to cap off the year, and something that I am very eager to rewatch in the near future.
As you mentioned, a movie that you and I don't see 100% eye to eye on, but a film, hopefully by the time that this episode is dropped and released, I will have seen it for a second time. I am eager to kind of get back in theaters and see if my opinion on this film changes at all over time, because I was initially not necessarily the most impressed by this movie, but I do have high hopes for it and high expectations, so I'm trying to kind of keep those in check and hopefully revisit this film. But for me, for my number 4 of 2024, I have, surprise, surprise, the movie that Corey already mentioned, The Substance. One of my biggest surprises of this year. Also one of the best body horror films I've seen in a long time. Expertly directed by, I might butcher this name, Coralie Farget. How do you think I pronounced that one?
I think Farget.
Farget.
Yeah.
It's
Some
probably
French
more,
bullshit.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Well, it's her name.
Sorry. All right, let's relax.
Yeah, I never came at you that hard.
Pause.
Coralie Farget. But Yeah, Demi Moore. You mentioned Demi Moore, Margaret Qualley, insane in this movie. Great performances, and it does a lot to show kind of how we perceive ourselves versus how others perceive us. I had just the best viewing of this movie with other people that I don't know if they knew exactly what they signed up for when they sat down in the theater to watch The Substance. But there was definitely a older couple that was kind of squirming and kind of antsy to get out of the theater, which for me, sometimes that means the movie's really good, or sometimes it's, this movie sucks. But luckily, this movie is just a masterpiece. I loved every second of it. It was so unpredictable. It is, like I said, it's one of the best modern body horror films. It is up there with the film Possessor Uncut, made by Brandon Cronenberg. It is just... It's a full experience. I never knew where it was going. Everything it showed me basically shocked the shit out of me. Margaret Qualley is great in this. Demi Moore is maybe, again, in her best performance I've ever seen. And if she doesn't get any sort of Oscar love, I will be pissed the fuck off for it, because I think that this is a career-defining role. I think this film, if you put someone else in this role, I don't think that they can deliver what Demi Moore did in this movie. I loved the gore. I loved the wild humor that sometimes sparked up. Dennis Quaid scared the living shit out of me just with his teeth. There's a lot of homages to classic horror films. There's a lot of similar shot structures to The Shining and 2001: A Space Odyssey and a bunch of different other Kubrick stuff and just horror iconography that really worked for me. The film is, 2 hours and 20-ish minutes, I think, and it flies by. It is so well paced. I was never bored. It never got stale for me. Every time they do the transfer from body to body and they do the activator and all those tubes come out and the body basically carves out of the spine of the other one, it just was some of the most fun shit I saw on screen, and also some of the most just gut-wrenching, disgusting shit I've seen on screen in a while. So it's an experience. The moment I watched it, I knew I wouldn't forget anytime soon, and I really am so glad to see this movie. I loved this director's previous work. The Revenge is such a wild action revenge horror-ish movie. And I'm so excited to see whatever they are going to do next. I can't say enough positive, good things about The Substance. It is looking like it is going to be my favorite horror film of 2024 at my number 4 spot for the year.
For sure. And I'm glad this movie is getting awards consideration. I was a little bit worried going in, but I hope it translates into Oscar noms.
It's a bit out there, so it's like, all right, well, what are you guys going to let in terms of genre fare? So
yeah, definitely great. So at my number 3, a movie that Mason has talked about already, but it is Civil War. This movie for me has a very personal connection just because for the last couple of years I have been working as a journalist. I've been working for the news station in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. So, I mean, I've always loved movies about journalism, but just having the career of doing it now and being in the thick of it for a couple years really made me appreciate this movie. And like Mason said, the way that it's just these photojournalists that are trying to cover the events with no bias, I think is really important for this movie because, you know, like you said, there were so many things about like, oh, is this a conservative? Is this a liberal movie? Yeah. And that was a lot of the discussion about it. I don't think that's what this movie's about at all. Mm-mm. I really don't think that's what Alex Garland was doing with this movie. I think that he was presenting it as it was and as these characters would see it in this situation, and more of through the lens of these characters and not through the lens of a political ideology. And I think that's a really powerful thing that I fear is getting kind of lost on some people when they're talking about this movie because...
And in the fucking world.
Yeah, right.
Which is sad, scary, upsetting.
Yeah, and it's like we obviously both have our different political views on things and whatever. That's I don't think that was the point of this. I think it's displaying these people that are putting their lives at risk to show the mass population what's going on. And it really is. It's at my number 3, and maybe it is my favorite horror movie of the year.
Yeah.
Which is we talked about it on the way out of the theater. We're like, we were terrified by some parts in this movie, like Jesse Plemons, as you mentioned. But even the final sequence of this movie is just unsettling, and it just makes you feel kind of gross, like you need to take a shower after watching this movie. But it is really powerful. It's really good, and I hate that it was released so early in the year because I think
it's gonna get forgotten.
Yeah, it's getting forgotten. I don't think it's gonna get any Oscar nominations. Sadly, I really do. I don't think, if it was released in October, November, I think it would have maybe. But this movie really did hit me. I really loved watching it, and just like I said, just as a journalist myself for my career, I appreciated it so much, and I think it's a very important movie to watch for our generation because I think it illustrates how to view current events from a very unbiased perspective.
With this movie coming out during fucking election year in the United States, and everyone is kind of, tensions are high, I think Alex Garland, what he did in this film was pretty early on misinterpreted by people that weren't willing to sit down and actually watch this film. He was trying to objectively display things and not give what bad news necessarily tends to be, which is a lot of opinion-filled, biased information. This film tries to objectively present things to you, which a lot of the things that it's presenting are horrific. And they're not horrific because someone says they are. It's horrific because you're watching someone's head be lit on fire. You're watching people getting pinned down by a sniper and they have no way out. Yeah, you might have put it the best way. It's maybe the best horror film of the year. Substance may fall into that genre, but this movie is truly horrifying. Moving into my number 3, which a movie Corey already mentioned. We're going to have that a lot in these last couple of picks here. But my number 3 is Deadpool and Wolverine. I never in my adult life thought that I would be gifted with the beauty and the elegance and the humility and the perfection that is Wesley Snipes as Blade. And I'm sorry if you haven't seen this movie. If you haven't seen Deadpool and Wolverine by fucking January of 2025, that's on you. And I'm going to hold you to that. Wesley Snipes is in this movie, people. And I about jizzed in my pants. Okay, before I get all disgusting on it, I love Deadpool. I think the first Deadpool film is one of my favorite comic book films. It's one of my favorite superhero films. I think it's such a well-told, concise action film with a good love story at the center of it. Deadpool 2, pretty good, solid follow-up. Doesn't necessarily fully live up to the perfection, I think, almost of the first film. And then we get this film, which is the first foray of Deadpool finally entering into the MCU, and I think that this movie has so much good humor going into this low point of the MCU, of this multiversal bullshit. But who is better to fucking enter at this low point and mention how shitty it's been and mention, you know what, we should maybe correct things moving forward than Deadpool. And you know what? He's coming with Wolverine, because why not? Bring Hugh Jackman back. Which, originally when I heard that, I was like, you're going to sully Logan. I love Logan. It is maybe the second best comic book film ever made. I love that movie. But, you know what? Seeing Deadpool dance to NSYNC while throwing fucking adamantium body all around and just killing TVA agents, fucking all for it. Loved it. So, this movie had me grinning from beginning to end. I've seen it 2.5 times in theaters. Only a half. I didn't try to leave early. I was late to a beer league softball game, so I had to sneak out before the movie wrapped up. But wow, what a fun movie. I've watched it a couple of times since it's been out on physical release. It is such a fun film. Again, like I started with, to see Wesley Snipes walk out. And not only that, and I can't say his line, but his first word in this film, just as a person that grew up in the early 2000s, made me fucking holler. I want you to do research, people. I want you to look into this and figure out definitively what his first line is in this fucking movie, because it brought me to life to hear that in a 2024 made film. But yeah, I have no notes. You killed it. There's surprising amounts of emotion towards the end, especially with Madonna playing in the background wildly. It's a crazy sentence. Hugh Jackman gives a stellar performance as Wolverine as always. Ryan Reynolds proves that he is a national treasure, even if he is a Canadian national treasure. I love this film. I love being able to see Channing Tatum. Again, if you haven't seen this movie, that's your fucking loss. Channing Tatum's in this movie as Gambit. And, ooh, I'm about to make a name for myself here.
Woo, I'm about to make a name for myself here.
When he pops up, jeez. Oh my God, I about impregnated myself. That was so awesome.
Nice.
I love this movie. It was beginning to end maybe the most fun I've had in theaters. It was just a wild ride of just who's who. I'm smiling. It's not formulaic, thrown together slop like Madam Web or like Craven. It's something made with intention and purpose and humility and fun at heart. And I fucking love Deadpool and Wolverine. It is the best MCU movie of the year because it's the only one, but also I feel like if it came out in any of the past 5 years, it would be the best MCU movie released that year.
Also, shout out to Sean Levy for directing this movie. He did a great job.
Thank you.
Handling everything in this movie is a very impressive feat. And I, as I said before, very, very much enjoyed it. Getting into the top two. Another movie that Mason already mentioned, but it is Sing Sing, the movie that emotionally hit me the most this year. This story is so riveting, but also so emotionally impactful of these inmates at this prison facility just trying to find a better version of themselves through theater and just in a play. And some of them, like Clarence Macklin's character, are very resistant to it at first and are like, this is dumb. Like, I don't want to do this. And once they get into it, they find something in themselves. And there's a scene in this movie where all of the inmates in this theater program are sitting around, and the kind of director played by Paul Raci, who was great in this movie and very underrated, also great in Sound of Metal, he just tells them to close your eyes and think about where you want to be. Where do you want to be right now? Where's the best moment of your life? And every guy, it's a beautiful filmmaking, beautiful storytelling. The camera just moves around to each character as each man just talks about where they're at, whether it's just sitting on a park bench with their family member, just looking out at the river, or it's just, with their family, or it's just by themselves appreciating a moment. It made me tear up. It made me cry so much in this movie of just seeing these guys in prison, where their moment in life is, where their specific best part of their life is, where they could be at any moment. And there's so many moments like that throughout this movie. You mentioned Coleman Domingo, who is just, in the past few years, has been just a force. And who's somebody that I feel like I've discovered lately in the past few years has been so great, and he delivers such a great performance. I hope he gets nominated for an Oscar for this movie, but it really is the most emotional movie I've seen this year, and honestly, of the past couple years, like this and Past Lives from 2023 are the two movies that, for me personally, just got into my soul, just really hit me emotionally and made me feel something. And I really love this movie. I would recommend it to anybody because I don't think that enough people have seen it, but I think that this is a movie that anybody could watch. There's some movies on this list that I wouldn't recommend to a lot of people, but Sing Sing is a movie that I think anybody can watch and be like, oh wow, this really, really does work. And it's not a weird movie, it's not a strange movie, it really is just a straightforward kind of drama, but it really hits on all those emotional beats.
Yeah, what a stellar film. And that was a movie you and I both saw earlier on this year, and the fact that it was able to kind of withstand the waves of great movies, bad movies, good movies, and still be on our top 10s towards the end of this year is, yeah, it speaks volumes about how well made this film is and how emotional the film is. It is such a great movie, and I completely agree. If you haven't seen it, just about anyone could and should be able to sit down and watch this movie. It is such a emotional, resonant film for just about anyone and everyone. Moving on, again, a movie already mentioned, but to my number 2 is Wicked. I think I'm going to keep my statements about this film relatively short and sweet because I've talked a decent amount so far on previous episodes about this film. This is the best Oz has ever been. I can't wait for a sequel. Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande give some of the best musical performances I've ever seen. Ariana Grande truly surprised the living shit out of me. And I saw her in Victorious, which is a Nickelodeon kids show, sure. But her comedic timing in this movie is relentless and flawless. Her hair flipping is such a stupid, funny gag that I think about, and it's just... Toss? It's perfect. And I'm pretty sure I put this in my review on our Instagram, but Wicked, this film is why I think movies are made. It is a movie that caught me off guard. It's a movie that had me crying at times, even when it wasn't necessarily sad. It was just, wow. It made me feel like a kid watching this movie happen. It made me feel like I was experiencing a classic in real time. When Cynthia Erivo takes flight during the song Defying Gravity, I could barely keep myself in my seat. That movie, Wicked, is, like I said, why movies are made for the big screen, and why film is the best medium around.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said, man. It's a beautiful statement for sure.
Do you want to just double team this next one, since you and I both have the same number one?
We both have the same number one. It's Dune Part 2. Dune Part 2 is the best movie of the year.
Far and away.
This is exactly what a sequel should do. And I'm very happy that this was successful financially as well, because I think it's a very weird concept. It's a very weird story, but people responded to it. And I love Dune Part 1. I really enjoyed that movie. That was kind of my first exposure to Dune and this world that was very interesting. This movie does all of that, builds off of that first movie so incredibly well, and it has a cast that is just insane. I'm not even going to list all of them because they're also great.
Zendaya, Josh Brolin,
but
Chalamet.
It's so incredible. All the supporting performances, even the small ones, are really, really great in this movie. And I mean, we saw this on opening day, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. And then we both walked out and we're like, we need to see this tomorrow in 70 millimeter. Because there's a theater that shows 70 millimeter. We're like, we need to experience that movie. And we saw it the morning after. Mm-hmm. And that's a testament to just how great this movie is. The character arcs for Paul Atreides, for Chani, played by Zendaya, for all of the Fremen in the movie, the political players, the Harkonnens, Austin Butler is Fade Routha. It's just, there's so much to love about this movie. It's a sci-fi classic. This feels, and I know this is a very big statement, but these Dune movies feel like the Star Wars of our generations, of what's coming out right now that is sci-fi classics. Both movies, I think, work so incredibly well, and I absolutely loved seeing this in theaters. I also saw it in IMAX after you and I saw it. I just saw it by myself and went and saw it in IMAX, and it was just such a great experience. This is cinema. Like, Denis Villeneuve and Christopher Nolan, I think, are the two directors right now that are showing why we need to see movies in theaters. This movie, if you didn't see it in theaters, I feel very sorry, because it is such an immersive experience, and it is the best movie of the year for both of us.
Without fail and without hesitation, I would say with this film, I would say Denis Villeneuve has entered the conversation for greatest director of all time. You look back at his filmography with Arrival and Sandees, Prisoners, Enemy, Blade Runner 2049, The First Dune. He's got banger after banger. He doesn't miss. And I think the best director ever is Stanley Kubrick. And with this film, I think Denis Villeneuve has entered himself into that two-horse race. I love this movie. I think the performances are flawless. There's not a single missed note in this movie. I love Christopher Walken as the Emperor. I love Florence Pugh's edition. I love the small roles, the big roles. I love the way that this film examines the dangers of a man having too much power and being misguided or pushed in a way that he feels is his destiny, even though it's not written for him yet. This made me love the world of Dune more. I went back and read the original Dune book written by Frank Herbert, read Dune Messiah just because I'm so antsy I need to know what happens next. I hope Timothée Chalamet, if he gets a nomination this award season, that it is for Paul Atreides and not necessarily for Bob Dylan. Granted, he's great in that film, A Complete Unknown, but him in Dune Part 2, his scene where he goes south and he goes to the council of all the Fremen and he basically says, you can say what you think. You can try and flex your expertise or your experience on me, but I'm leading the way. I am in charge here. That scene is one of the best scenes I've ever seen. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. This is, I think, without a doubt, the best film ever made since I've been alive. I was born in 2000. I think this is the best film easily since 2000. I saw it 5 times in theaters. I've seen it twice since then. It blows me away every time. It's never boring. It's expertly paced. It is a true epic. And it is expertly crafted. Denis Villeneuve, if you don't win Best Director for this film, if you don't get nominated for Best Director for this film, there's a mistake being made. This is, without a doubt, without fail, one of the most stunning things I've ever seen in my life, film or otherwise. I feel so lucky to have been able to see it. Like you said, that opening night and then that next morning in 70 millimeter, and then I tried to just take any one of my relatives that wanted to see a 3-hour long epic to the theaters to see Dune Part 2 because this movie really rocked me. It works perfectly for me. It is a perfect sci-fi film. I don't really throw around the word perfect in terms of films a whole lot. My favorite film of all time is The Godfather. My second favorite film of all time is Dune Part 2. And I've made a top 100 list, and Dune Part 2 quickly climbed that list, as Corey can attest to, as I have my top 100, at least when we lived together, I had my top 100 list in my bedroom, and all of those films in order. And as soon as I got the Dune 2 Steelbook, it just, I thought about it more and more, and it just climbed and etched its way to my number 2 spot. And it's perfect almost, I'd say. It is such a fantastic film.
Absolutely. Very well said. I mean, yeah, the movie fucking rips. We've been
It's
talking
so
about it.
crazy.
We've been talking about it since March.
Yeah,
when this
which
opened.
is wild.
And
I hope it gets recognition this award season because it is such an early release in this past year, and I hope it has enough staying power, which thankfully I think Timothée Chalamet is going to help it kind of hopefully linger into award season because I think it deserves whatever award it gets nominated for in any category. I guarantee you it deserves it.
For sure. Yeah. So there it is.
Yeah.
There's our top 10 of the year, our honorable mentions, worst, dog shit of the fucking year. I think we covered a lot of really good movies and just a lot of interesting movies to talk about. Mm-hmm. So,
Corey, before we get going here, could you, I think it might be nice, will you run through your 10 through 1 of your top 10 for 2024 just so we can have a concise listing of your favorite films from 2024?
Yes. Starting from 10 to 1, we've got Furiosa and Mad Max Saga, Kinds of Kindness, Wicked, The Substance, Deadpool and Wolverine, Late Night with the Devil, Nosferatu, Civil War, Sing Sing, and Dune Part 2.
It was a good ass year.
Yeah, Megalopolis did not make the list.
Sorry, Francis Ford Coppola. I still actually haven't seen that film.
Yeah,
but
I'm excited to talk about that
whenever I do get around to seeing it. To reiterate, my top 10 films of 2024. Number 10, A Real Pain. Number 9, Strange Darling. Please go see that movie. Number 8, Heretic. Number 7, Late Night with the Devil. Number 6, Sing Sing. Number 5, Civil War. Number 4, The Substance. Number 3, Deadpool and Wolverine. Number 2, Wicked. And number 1, Dune Part 2. Wow. What a long episode of talking about what I think we'll look back on as being a relatively great year for movies. I know, honestly, when we look back into recent memory, I feel like 2014, 2017, even 2019.
2019 was great.
Kind of just movies, or years that were just bangers for movies. And obviously there was like the 1993s, 94s, 99s. There's years in movies. I don't know if 2024 will creep up into being that iconic level. But it was a year that I feel like I was blessed with some of my favorite movies of recent memory. But thank you for sitting down with us, having hopefully some liquor drinks, as I finally was able to suck down a full glass of Lagavulin. This is our 10th episode of Slate Night the Film Fan podcast. Please follow us on Instagram. If you are listening to us on a podcast forum, however you fucking found us, thank you for reaching out and trying to find us and trying to listen to us. If you made it to the end of this episode, how? Please leave us a review if you could, if you would. We'd really appreciate it. In the world of film, it's not just about what happens on screen, but also about who's sitting next to you in the theater. And from my best friend Corey and I at Slate Night, I'd like to say that that's a wrap.